So investors are cautious ahead of tomorrow's Reserve Bank meeting, and interest rates will almost certainly remain at record lows. The RBA has indicated they'll remain that way for years. And I guess investors are also cautious ahead of the economic growth figures, the GDP figures, which are out on Wednesday. Not helping, or I guess, Australia-China tensions, with China announcing a second probe into Australian wine imports. But the best performers, a company called Mosaic Brands, that jumped 18%. It's better known for its brands, Miller's, Katie's, Noni B. That's because it resolved a rental dispute with Westfield. 2 weeks ago, Westfield actually locked up those 129 of those stores because the company wasn't able to pay full rent, whereas Mosaic accused Westfield of just not sharing the burden of coronavirus. And Temple & Webster, the online furniture shop, it shot up 18% its shares because its profit went up 270% over the year. So online sales, that's a trend that's been continuing. It's going very strong. Now, it was actually more interesting in overseas markets. New Zealand fell pretty hard, down 1.3%. The NZX website crashed for the 5th day in a row, but it still managed to keep trading. And it follows a series of cyber attacks on the New Zealand exchange last week. But the best performer was the Japanese stock market. It shot up 2% at one stage. It was the best performer. And it's pretty much recovered all of last Friday's losses. You'll remember last Friday, the Japanese market had a big sell-off after the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe announced his resignation for health reasons. Now, investors have calmed down a bit, and they've realised that the likely successor to Abe will probably continue his economic policies, which would be easy money and a lot of stimulus, and also boosting the Japanese market. It's worth mentioning because there's some big news in the area.
Yes.
Was news that billionaire investor Warren Buffett has amassed a 5% stake in Japan's 5 biggest companies, including Mitsubishi. So the stake's worth $8.5 billion. And he made that announcement on his 90th birthday. So no signs of him slowing down.
No, absolutely not. Or you. No signs of you slowing down either, David. I'll speak to you soon. David Chow there. One new case of coronavirus has been detected in Queensland overnight in a person already in home isolation. The new infection is a close contact of a previously identified case linked to a cluster at the Correctional Training Academy in Brisbane's West, taking that outbreak to 24. The Premier, Anastasia Palaszczuk, insists she won't budge on her closed border policy. But she says a new health unit will be set up to deal with specialist medical appointments from interstate.
The federal government can throw whoever they want at that. We can have Clive Palmer as well. But I'm not going to be moved because fundamentally the health of Queenslanders is my number one concern. And you can't have a strong economy, you can't have the economy growing unless you have the health under control. Now, I've seen some reports today about a young boy who had an appointment at Prince Charles. And let me say, I understand that this is a very difficult time for people. It is a very emotional time for people, and what I've asked the Deputy Premier as Health Minister and also the departments to do is to actually set up a unit where they can deal with these specialist appointments in a coordinated manner. I also want to have a social worker working in that unit as well, because it is a very distressing time for families. And of course it's going to be like this for some time because our borders are closed to protect the health of Queenslanders. But we are not going to deny emergency treatment to people in New South Wales, and we are not going to deny specialist appointments to people who need the specialist appointments in Queensland. Let me make that very clear. And I understand how distressing this is, so we're going to set up this hotline to make sure that we can deal with these to coordinate with the families in a timely manner.
Face masks are now mandatory on public transport across New Zealand as restrictions begin to ease in Auckland. Social gatherings of up to 10 people are now allowed and up to 50 people can attend funerals. The country reported 9 new infections today, 5 linked to the Auckland cluster. The remaining 4 are in hotel quarantine.
The public can be really awesome. So maybe one person I've seen so far, a young person going to school. So on the whole, the public are being really awesome at doing their part to ensure that they have a face covering to be worn.
So far, everyone's been wearing masks as far as the eye can see, and I'm going to be spending most of it on the outbrinks of Auckland, so I'm not too bad, and none of us can leave the facility just to make safe and everything. So yeah, I feel absolutely safe.
Early in the program, we promised to bring you an interview with Aboriginal lawyer and founder of the Cape York Institute, Noel Pearson. It will be airing later on the channel, and it will also be on my other program, RN Drive, tonight on Radio National Drive. So we will play that full interview later. Time now for my political panel, National Senator Bridget McKenzie and Labor MP Luke Gosling. Welcome to both of you. And I want to start with Victoria. There are 2,620 active cases in the state, 154 are in regional local government areas under stage 3. Bridget McKenzie, if we can start with you, do you want regions to open up before Melbourne, or should it be a kind of unified progression?
Yeah, it's a great question, Patricia. It's something that we've been prosecuting in the National Party now for 8 weeks. I believe that we should be treating isolated outbreaks of COVID-19 in isolation. You'll recall mid-June we had 12 LGAs in Melbourne proper that were seeing concerning levels of community transmission, and we really should have locked them down swiftly and securely then, rather than end up in the situation we are now. So if a community or a region, a hotspot if you like, is evidencing community transmission and a high number of cases, then it should be shut down, rather than have what we've got at the moment, where you've got essentially COVID-free communities out in regional Victoria being in stage 3 lockdown, having their healthcare challenged, their schooling, and also losing their livelihoods because of something that's happening hundreds of kilometres away in Melbourne.
Luke Gosling, what do you make of that? I mean, given the different spread of the virus, we know obviously in Melbourne it's a whole different picture. Is that the way forward, as of course the sort of way out, the pathway out is determined?
Yeah, I wouldn't be telling Dan Andrews and the Victorian government what they should do. They're in the best position, taking the expert advice to work out what they should be doing. If I reflect on the job that the NT government has been doing, and Michael Gunner, the Chief Minister there, they took swift action to close down communities to protect people, and are taking the advice about how you can lift those restrictions in order to make sure that people are safe. So I'd just encourage people not to play politics with this and to follow the expert health advice.
Luke Gosling,
Patricia,
yeah, okay, yep, absolutely.
I was just going to say, Luke's exactly right. We shouldn't be basing decisions on populist political polling numbers. Premiers should actually be using medical advice on how to actually deal with this highly contagious virus within their own state borders, rather than the lazy approach, however popular it may be, of slamming down hard border closures and severely impacting regional communities.
Just some breaking news. Tony Burke, who's the leader of opposition business, is tweeting that the House of Representatives has collapsed for want of a quorum. And he says he has no idea how long since this has happened, which is quite significant. And the House of Representatives has an absence of a quorum, so can't sit. Luke Gosling, you're a member of the lower house. What's going on?
I was just actually giving a speech in the House of Representatives, but I had to do it from the podium because I don't have a spot in the chamber today. So this situation for some people, like some representatives from Victoria, is unfortunately unavoidable, but it's just a bit of an example, I think, about how all over the shop the Morrison government is, that they can't organise enough people to keep the parliament going. Like, everyone's doing their best. We're coming in by video conference. We're coming down from all over Australia to make sure that our constituents are represented, and the federal government, the Morrison government, can't seem to get their act together to keep the show on the road.
Bridget McKenzie, you are a member of the Senate, but your government has lost quorum in the lower house, which is pretty extraordinary. What does this demonstrate? Does this go to the issues around what Barnaby Joyce has been arguing earlier today, that there needs to be a new model, voting from home? Does there need to be broader changes? What's going on here?
Oh, look, I've found it quite challenging, this sitting, having remote participation. The connectivity hasn't always been great. We've had senators dropping out mid-contribution. I think you might recall Richard Di Natale's valedictory speech, got interrupted because of connectivity issues. I do think, obviously these are unprecedented times, but it is important for parliamentarians to come to work. I'm glad we've got our MPs and senators back to Canberra to actually put the case of their communities to the Parliament. I mean, for those of us that live out in rural and regional Australia, the impact of COVID-19 and the decisions of city-centric premiers is having a really severe impact. And if we weren't able to come to Parliament to raise these issues and to put the needs and interests of agriculture workers and border communities on the record, there would be no other place for that to happen. So Parliament sitting is important, and in terms of what's just happened in the House of Representatives, I'm sorry, this is the first I'm hearing of.
No, you're a senator, I understand that. But Luke Gosling, does it also...
You
blamed it. If I could just ask you...
I think it's pretty indicative of the crap NBN that this government... Australia. That could have something to do with Bridget's poor connectivity for the teleconferences.
It could.
Cheap shot, Luke. Cheap shot.
Look, weak internet connection.
Yeah, true one though, eh?
Weak internet connection is very frustrating for everyone. So, yep, I reckon we're all going to sign up to saying weak internet, no good. But Luke Gosling, you blamed the government for not being able to get quorum. Are there broader structural issues here too, though? We are working in this new COVID remote model. Does it demonstrate more needs to change to make it more sustainable?
Yeah, I heard Barnaby Joyce this morning on Radio National on the AM program, and I thought, some of what he had to say was fantastic, particularly the bit where he's backing the Northern Territory to retain 2 seats in the House of Representatives, and we're waiting on to see whether he supports that or not. But the of proper representation for people all around this country, not just in the Northern Territory but elsewhere, is a major issue. We've got a situation where that bill to ensure there's at least 2 members of the House of Representatives for the NT can't be voted on because we can't get an absolute majority in the House, and that situation is pretty unacceptable, and we all hope that we can return to normal and have our Victorian brothers and sisters back as soon as possible. But I think the government's got a bit of work to do to sort it out so that we can keep the show on the road.
Bridget McKenzie, there's been a big focus on aged care, as you know, in the last week or so from the opposition particularly, and really disturbing level of deaths reported today, harrowing for those families. Today, the federal government, of course, has made announcements in relation to aged care. But are you concerned that there are still health workers working across multiple aged care facilities?
Well, I think we all understand how difficult it has been for the aged care sector since January with COVID-19 and the rolling changes that have had to occur, from ensuring PPE is available, making sure that the workforce is appropriately trained in infection control, etc. And you'll see that we have announced an additional $563 million today to assist with that work. I mean, it's just critical. 419, as of yesterday, Australians have passed away in our aged care system, and that's a tragedy for every single person who has lost a loved one. And I think not being able to be with those you love and care about at that time in their life is really, really disappointing.
So does that make it acceptable that there would be health workers working across aged care facilities then, and increasing the risk?
Well, that's one of the issues that we're having to deal with, and to really get a plan in place so that a single worker will be attached to a single
It's workplace. A bit late now, though. I mean, given the rates of deaths we're seeing, it's cold comfort, isn't it? It's come pretty late into the piece.
Well, I think we've seen the dealing with this pandemic on a whole raft of areas and different industries is playing out very, very differently. The government's obviously responding as quickly as possible whilst working with the private aged care sector and state and territory governments to get the best possible outcome they can.
Luke Gosling, I'll give you the final word on this. There has been an announcement today from the federal government. Are you satisfied that it will deal with that issue around the vulnerability of aged care workers moving around?
I'm quite worried about it, continue to be worried about it. I think it's September tomorrow. Coronavirus has been around for a long time. There's been an aged care Royal Commission that's put out an interim report, and they're talking about coming up with a plan. I mean, that should have been done like a long time ago, and I'm very worried for people in aged care facilities. I'm not sure if that figure is correct on the number of deaths, but there have just been so many, and so many would be avoided if they even started looking at the interim recommendations of that Royal Commission. Our senior Territorians, our senior Australians deserve a lot better. I'm very worried about personal care assistants too that are going out into servicing people in their homes that aren't in residential facilities but are in their homes, and them having the right equipment that they need. It's incumbent on everyone working in this area to make sure that the staff are equipped well. But there's some big questions here about ratios, and we need to really answer them, have an honest conversation about it, and the government obviously needs a new minister and it needs to pull its finger out.
Thanks to both of you, National Senator Bridget McKenzie there and Labor MP Luke Gosling. For more on this issue, I'm joined by the Chief Executive of the Councils on the Ageing, Ian Yates. Ian Yates, welcome. What do you make of today's announcement? Is it enough, and are you satisfied in relation to this issue of aged care workers working across multiple sites?
Thanks, Patricia. This afternoon's announcement is about 5 or 6 different measures, all of which essentially are funding stuff that's either been in existence or previously announced. And one of them, as you've highlighted, is the measure to have one worker per site, and the government has put the funding in place behind that. That's been being implemented for some time. There is a significant issue that government doesn't have a clear line of sight on that because we don't have a worker registration scheme. The government's working on that at the moment. But my understanding is that it has been quite substantially achieved in Victoria, and other states are now looking at it. And obviously it presents some logistic difficulties